At my son's wedding, his future mother-in-law clinked her champagne glass, looked straight at me, and said loud enough for the entire garden to hear, "Some women give birth. Some women are actually fit to be mothers. Poor Ethan only got the first kind." The bride threw her head back and laughed. Her bridesmaids giggled. A couple of guests covered their mouths and pretended they didn't hear. My son didn't laugh. He stood up, walked to the microphone, called off the wedding on the spot. And the next morning, I pushed a button that quietly took their family's little empire away from them. And the best part, they still don't fully understand how I did it.
Before I tell you how this beautiful catastrophe unfolded, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. And honestly, what would you have done if someone said that about you at your own kid's wedding?
6 months before the wedding, I was 61 years old, living in a small vinyl-sided house on a quiet street in Lincoln Grove, Nebraska. If you'd driven by, you'd have seen a 10-year-old Corolla in the driveway, geraniums and mismatched pots, a plastic flamingo my neighbor's grandkids stuck in my yard as a joke. And I was the stereotype people love to pat on the head. Retired bookkeeper, widow, church potluck casseroles, sensible walking shoes, coupons in a little accordion folder. If you stood me next to Elaine Harbor, you'd chuckle. Elaine was everything I wasn't. Spray tan glow, white blazer, diamond studs, Pilates posture, a Volvo SUV the size of a small yacht, and a last name that meant something in our town. The Harpers owned 3 luxury retirement communities, a private rehab clinic, and the charity foundation that looked very generous on Instagram. Everyone called them pillars of the community. I call them something else, but that's not church appropriate. My son Ethan met their daughter Grace at the hospital. He's a nurse. She's a physical therapist. He came home after their 3rd date with that stupid, shining look boys get when they've forgotten how bad high school prom was. "Mom," he said, "I think this might be serious." I was happy for him, nervous but happy, because while I was cutting coupons, the Harpers lived in a heritage estate on the hill, hosted fundraisers, and donated wings to things that got their names on plaques. What people didn't know was this. While they were flashing their money around, I spent 25 years quietly turning my husband's $180,000 life insurance policy and my bookkeeper salary into something larger. By the time Ethan met Grace, the poor widow in the blue house had a net worth of just over $4.7 million. And absolutely nobody knew it. I met Grace for the first time at my kitchen table. She arrived in heels that had no business on my cracked driveway, gave Ethan a quick kiss, then scanned my tiny kitchen like she was evaluating it for demolition. "Mrs. Carter," she said brightly, holding out a delicate hand, "I've heard so much about you." I wiped my hands on my apron and shook. Up close, she was beautiful, polished, and about as warm as a refrigerated solid bar. She glanced at my laminate countertops, my mismatched mugs, my fridge held together by magnets of grandkids who weren't mine yet. "So cozy," she said, with that smile rich girls learn in prep school. "It's like a movie set. Even says you've lived here forever?" "Since before he was born," I said. "His dad and I bought it when interest rates were a nightmare and carpet was high fashion." She laughed politely, then, "Do you worry about long-term financial stability, like as you age?"
I felt my eyebrows climb. "I'm sorry?" I said. She fidgeted with her gold bracelet. "Oh, I just mean nursing care, assisted living. Those things are really expensive now. Daddy says most people are one bad fall away from bankruptcy." "And what does Daddy suggest we do about that?" I asked calmly. Maybe it was the way I said it, because she flushed. "I didn't mean anything, just that you must feel so, vulnerable, being on a fixed income." I topped off her iced tea instead of my original idea, which was throwing it in her lap. A few weeks later, Elaine asked to get to know Ethan's family. She didn't mean extended family. She meant me. She arrived in a cream pantsuit and heels that were not meant for my gravel. She stood in my living room like she was waiting for someone to bring her a Lysol wipe. "Linda," she said, kissing the air near my jig. "Please call me Elaine. I feel so silly insisting on titles." Everything about her said, "Don't touch me." We said, "I offered coffee." She declined, and then told me her barista's name like she was talking about a pet. "Ethan is wonderful. Grace is absolutely smitten." I smiled. "He's a good man. His father would be proud." "Yes, I heard you lost your husband. So tragic." She looked around. "It's impressive. You've managed to keep the house." "Managed," I repeated. "Yes, on a nurse's salary and a widow's pension. You must be very resourceful." She said resourceful the way some people say rodent. Then the real reason for the visit surfaced. We believe in clear expectations. Marriage is merging families. It's important to know what each side can bring to the table. I almost laughed. She leaned in. "Grace mentioned you don't really travel or entertain or invest." I said nothing. "Sure, we're not asking for details, of course," she lied, "but we want to make sure Ethan understands the limitations he's accustomed to won't be sustainable. Grace was raised with a certain standard." There it was again. Limitations. Their favorite word. I sipped my coffee and let her talk, because when rich people think you're harmless, they say the most amazing things. The engagement happened in December. Big ring, bigger Instagram post, tiny amount of actual romance. Grace called me first thing the next morning. "Mrs. Carter, Linda, oh my gosh, we're so excited," she squealed. "Mom already booked the estate for June. It'll be a garden wedding. We're thinking 250 guests." "That's a lot of potato salad," I said. She laughed like I told a dad joke. "The Harpers are covering the big things: venue, catering, band, decor. We know your side of the family is more modest, so we'll keep your responsibilities simple. Maybe rehearsal dinner snacks or something?" "Snacks," I repeated. "Or if that's too much, just your presence is gift enough." She had no idea she'd just lit a fuse. Because she'd made one tiny mistake in all her little background checks on poor Ethan Carter. Like most people, she'd never bothered to look up my maiden name. "Harper," she said proudly on the call. "Reynolds," I thought quietly. As in Reynolds Freight. As in the family-owned trucking and logistics company I'd grown up around. I'd left that world, married my mechanic husband, and chosen quiet over constant corporate drama. But I hadn't left my brain behind. And I certainly hadn't wasted my inheritance. A week after the engagement, I sat in the office of my financial advisor, Greg. He flipped through my portfolio with a little whistle. Linda, if I didn't know you, I'd think this file was mislabeled. That good or that bad? I asked. He turned the screen toward me. You're sitting at about $4.7 million total. Assets, accounts, properties. That's after taxes if we liquidate smartly. I nodded like he told me we were having meatloaf for dinner. You've done everything I suggested and then some. Low profile, high yield, patience. You could buy half this town. Funny you should say that, I murmured. Oh no, he said. What are you planning? I need cash, and I need it quiet. Before I decided what to do, I did what I've always done best. I checked the numbers. I dug into public records. Harper Senior Living LLC, Harper Wellness Foundation, Harper Ridge Holdings. All very impressive names. Underneath, not so impressive. The Heritage Estate up on the hill, heavily mortgaged. One of their retirement homes, recently refinanced and already struggling. The rehab clinic, profitable on paper, but only because of unpaid invoices and creative accounting. Their foundation, spending more on parties than actual charity. They were, as Greg put it, asset rich, cash poor, and living right on the edge. I called a friend who worked in commercial lending at the regional bank. Hypothetically, I said, if someone wanted to acquire some distressed commercial debt. He laughed. You going into slumlord mode, Linda? Hypothetically, I repeated. He stopped laughing when I wired the money. I won't bore you with every legal hoop. We'd be here all week. But in a few signatures and one very large wire transfer, I quietly bought the note on one of Harper retirement facilities the bank was desperate to get rid of. I took over the shell company that owned the land beneath Harper Ridge Country Club. And I joined a development group buying land around the hospital for a new medical complex. The same future lease income their clinic had already borrowed against. On paper, I was just another blandly named LLC. In reality, I'd just become the person who could decide whether several Harper ventures floated or sank. And no one at their house had the faintest idea I existed.
One night in March, Ethan came over with takeout and that troubled frown grown children get when they're about to confess something. Mom, he said, the Harpers offered me a position. My stomach dipped. At the clinic? I asked. At the corporate office, he said, some kind of clinical operations associate thing. It's basically management track. Grace says it's a huge opportunity. Salary? I asked. He shrugged. Base is low, but there's unlimited bonus potential once he proves himself. And I need to move closer to their side of town. Their realtor already has a condo picked out. All the hair on the back of my neck stood up. What about your current job at the hospital? I asked. I like it. I love my patients. But Grace keeps saying we can't afford a house on a nurse's salary that will be stuck forever if I don't level up. Her dad keeps talking about real men taking risks. Real men, of course.
Have you signed anything? I asked. He shook his head. Not yet. They want to finalize after the wedding. Something about not mixing business with vows. So they wanted him legally tied to their daughter before tying him to their company. Cute.
The rehearsal dinner was at Harper Ridge Country Club. Oak panels, wall-to-wall golf photos, waiters who looked terrified of dropping anything. I wore a simple teal dress from Kohl's and my mother's opal necklace. I looked like I belonged at bingo, not at a heritage venue, which was exactly the point. Grace floated around the room in a white cocktail dress like she owned the place. In fairness, on paper, her family sort of did. Elaine sat at the head table, holding court like a queen bee. Her husband, Colin, nodded along at the appropriate moments. I'd brought a small wrapped box as a rehearsal gift. Grace opened it and pulled out a framed, embroidered quote. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love doesn't keep score of who paid for the wedding. She forced a laugh. So cute, she said. Very you. Wine flowed, waiters circled, people toasted. Then Elaine turned to me, laid a hand on mine, and said in a voice just a little too loud. So, Elaine, have you decided what you're going to do with the house once Ethan is saddled? It must be hard managing a property that size at your age. Property that size? My house wouldn't fit in their garage. I'm managing, I said. She smiled sympathetically. We just worry about older people living alone. There are some lovely independent living communities we work with. Very safe, very structured. You wouldn't have to worry about things like property taxes. I don't worry about taxes, I said. I file them. She laughed like I made a joke. Then she leaned closer. And of course, once there are grandchildren, we want them in a stable environment. Grace and Ethan will be very busy. They'll need someone appropriate to help occasionally. Appropriate. There it was again. For half a second, the old me wanted to disappear into the carpet, pretend I hadn't heard, and just focus on my water glass. Then I saw my son's face across the room. The shame wasn't mine anymore. It was theirs. I smiled so sweetly, I'm surprised she didn't get a cavity. Don't you worry. I've got their future all figured out. She thought I meant emotionally. I meant legally and financially. The morning of the wedding was disgustingly perfect. Sunny, not too hot, birds doing that Disney thing. The Harper's estate looked like Pinterest exploded. White chairs in rows on the lawn, flowers everywhere, a string quartet warming up under a gazebo, a champagne wall because, of course, I slipped my card containing a perfectly modest check for $5,000 onto the gift table. The real gift sat in a locked document case in my car. At 5:50 p.m., I took my assigned seat in the front row. Front row, but off to the side. Prime spot for photographs of real family while I blurred in the background. Ethan stood at the altar, looking handsome and terrified. Grace appeared at the top of the stone steps in lace and tulle that probably cost more than my Toyota. Guests oohed, photographers clicked. Elaine hovered near the aisle, soaking it all in like she was personally responsible for inventing weddings. Then she saw me. Really saw me. My off-the-rack dress, my two sensible sandals, my drugstore lipstick. She leaned toward her sister. Unfortunately for her, the DJ had just switched off the speakers and the garden had gone quiet. In that awful, clear silence, I heard her say, "Honestly, look at her. She looks like she wanted it from the church soup kitchen. That's not a mother of the groom. That's a cherry gase in polyester." Her sister snorted. Grace, coming down the aisle, heard it too. She laughed. Actually laughed like it was the funniest thing she'd heard all week. She did a little clap, bouquet and all. My face went hot. That first instinct to shrink, to pretend I hadn't heard, flies through me. Then I saw Ethan's eyes. He had gone very, very still. And something in his face cracked clean down the middle.
Ethan stepped away from the officiant. He didn't look at Grace. He walked straight to the microphone set up for the readings and tapped it once. The speakers hummed to life. Testing? Yeah, hi, he said. The quartet faltered and stopped. Conversations died. 200 heads turned. Ethan? Grace called, still halfway down the aisle. What are you doing? This isn't... Grace, he said, just stay there a second. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. 5 minutes ago, I heard my fiancé and her mother talking about my mom. You could feel the collective "oh no" in the air. Ethan took a breath. My mother raised me by herself after my dad died. She worked 2 jobs, skipped meals so I could eat, and somehow still made time to help with homework and show up to every school concert with a camcorder. He looked at me then, just for a second. And I just heard 2 people who claim to love me call her a terry case in polyester and laugh about it. Grace's face went white. Ethan, that's not what... We were just joking, she said, taking a step down. He shook his head. If that's your sense of humor, I can't marry you. A ripple went through the crowd. I can't marry into a family that thinks cruelty is entertaining. I can't bind myself to people who look at the most important person in my life and see a punchline. He swallowed. So I'm calling this off right now in front of everyone. The silence after that was like a vacuum. Grace gasped. Elaine made a choking noise. Colin surged to his feet, red-faced. This is ridiculous. Ethan, you're upset. We can discuss this privately. No, we can't, Ethan said. You're happy enough to humiliate my mother publicly. We can end this publicly. He slipped the ring off his finger and set it on the nearest table. I'm sorry for the inconvenience, he said to the guest, voice shaking. There won't be a wedding today. If I'd let it in there, the gossip alone would have fed this town for a decade. But some meals deserve dessert. Colin pointed at Ethan like he was disciplining a teenager. You ungrateful boy, he snapped. We've welcomed you, offered you opportunities most people would kill for, and you throw it back in our faces because your mother can't take a joke? Every head turned back to me. There's a moment in every woman's life when she realizes This is it. I either stay small forever or I stand up. I stood, sensible sandals and all. Ethan, I called. May I say something? He stepped back from the mic and nodded, eyes bright. I walked up, took a breath, and looked out over a sea of very expensive outfits and very curious faces. First, I said, I'd like to thank the Harpers for this extremely educational afternoon. I've learned a lot about manners and about what money can't buy. A nervous laugh fluttered through the crowd. Elaine, I went on, you're right about one thing. I have lived modestly. I drive an old car. My house is small. I wear polyester with Macy's as a sale. I smiled. And I've done it very deliberately. Elaine's eyes narrowed, because while some people spend their lives showing off their money, some of us spend our lives growing it. I turned slightly so I could see her and Colin. You see, while you were checking my son's credit score and worrying about my limitations, I was quietly buying things you assumed you controlled. That got their attention. Your golf club, for instance, I said lightly. Lovely spot. Shame the land under it no longer belongs to Harper Ridge Holdings. Colin went pale. What are you talking about? He demanded. I'm talking about a little LLC you have never heard of, Carter and Son Holdings. It acquired the note on this property last month. A murmur went through the crowd. And that underperforming retirement facility you refinanced twice, the bank was very eager to offload that loan. They practically gift-wrapped it. I let that sink in. You're lying, she hissed. I shrugged. You're welcome to call your banker. He'll confirm the new owner of those debts. I turned back to the guests. The truth is, the woman you called a charity case has been sitting on a multi-million-dollar portfolio for years. Not because I needed to prove anything, but because I wanted my son to be free. Free from employers who would dangle his future like a leash. Free from in-laws who think they're buying a son instead of welcoming one. I looked at Ethan. And Ethan, sweetheart, that brings me to your wedding gift. His mouth dropped open. My what? I said, there's a document case in my car. Inside it is everything you need to know about the company that now owns stakes in 3 developments this family depends on. As of yesterday, you are the managing partner. The garden went dead silent again. Long story short, I finished, you don't need a commission job at Harper Wellness. They are now your tenants. Or they will be if they want to keep their signage where it is. I handed the mic back to my son and walked away. People actually parted like water. Let me tell you, walking through that fancy garden in my polyester felt better than any red carpet in the world. The next morning, I woke up, made coffee, and sat down at my laptop. My inbox was full. 3 frantic emails from the bank, 2 from the development group's attorney, 1 from the country club manager asking what change of ownership meant for the renewal. I logged into my brokerage dashboard. All of the paperwork had been prepared, all the signatures collected, all the approvals given. All that was left was the final transfer. There was a little glowing button on the screen. Confirm wire and execute transfers. I hovered my mouse over it for a second, thought about Elaine's voice saying, charity case in polyester, thought about Ethan's face at the altar, and clicked. With that one click, the note on the Harper retirement facility, the land lease beneath their beloved country club, and a critical chunk of leverage on their clinic's future lease moved fully and finally under Carter and Son Holdings. Some people express power by yelling. I prefer online banking. By 9:15 a.m., my phone rang. Greg said without preamble, Colin Harper is blowing up the bank.
What did you do? I executed a long-term strategy, I said. How's everything look on our end? Clean, he said. Very clean. You knew they were this overextended? I had a hunch. Around noon, Ethan knocked on my door, hair a mess, still in yesterday's wrinkled shirt, holding the document case. Mom, he said, closing the door behind him. Is this real? Yes, sweetheart, I said. Sit. You look like you need eggs. While I scrambled breakfast for lunch, he flipped through pages. Articles of incorporation, property schedules, debt assignments, partnership agreements naming him managing partner. 4.7 million? He whispered. You've had this much? All this time? Give or take market mood swings, I said. Started with your dad's policy, a little Reynolds inheritance, and a lot of saying no to things I couldn't afford so that one day you wouldn't have to. He stared. And you let them talk to you like that? I've let them reveal themselves, I corrected. There's a difference. He sank onto a chair. They thought I was marrying up, he said slowly. Turns out we were the upgrade. 2 days later, my landline rang. Very few people have that number. Mrs. Carter, a clipped male voice said, This is Daniel Price, counsel for the Harper family. Good morning, Mr. Price, I said, stirring sugar into my coffee. How can I help you? I'm calling regarding certain business transactions, he said. The Harpers are concerned there may have been irregularities in the acquisition of several assets. You're talking about the loans and land leases they failed to service properly? I asked. I can assure you, all my acquisitions were above board. Their lenders were thrilled to see the back of them. The Harpers are prepared to make you a generous offer, he said. They would like the opportunity to buy back controlling interest. I'm sure they would, I said. Unfortunately, Carter & Son Holdings is not a pawn shop. We're not in the business of selling leverage back to the people who wasted it. He cleared his throat. If you refuse to negotiate, there may be legal consequences. We could challenge these transfers. On what grounds, I asked, genuinely curious, that I had the nerve to read public filings and pay my bills? Silence. Mr. Price, I said, I don't want their house. I don't want their cars. I don't want their friends. What I want is simple, and that is, I want the residents in that retirement facility to stop complaining about understaffing. He was quiet. I want the clinic to stop double booking recovering addicts because beds are money. I let my voice harden. And I want your clients to stop treating human beings like props in their charity photos. You're tying business negotiations to basic decency, I said. Yes. I took a breath. Here's what I'm prepared to do. Carter & Son Holdings will restructure the facility debt at a sustainable rate if independent inspectors sign off on staffing and care. We will offer the country club a fair lease if they open up a few membership slots at cost for people who don't own six-figure boats but still like golf. And if we refuse, he asked, then the bank will get their payments from whoever buys the property at auction. And the Harpers can explain to their friends why their heritage club is now a Sprouts or a strip mall. I could almost hear him pinch the bridge of his nose.
I'll I'll relay your terms, he said finally. You do that. And Daniel? Yes. Tell Elaine I'm wearing polyester while
6 months after the non-wedding, Ethan and I stood on the sidewalk across from a construction site. The old Harper Ridge sign was gone. In its place, a tasteful, temporary banner read, Lincoln Grove Wellness and Community Center, a Carter and Son Holdings project. You renamed it, Ethan said. We're not slapping our name on the building, I said, just on the checks. But the lawyers insisted the holding company be listed. Through the glass, we could see wider doorways, an upgraded therapy wing, real flooring instead of that sticky fake wood. You really tied their financing to care standards? Ethan asked. Yes, I said. Quarterly inspections, anonymous staff surveys, resident advocates. And the Harpers? He asked. They sold their remaining stake at a discount. They're downsizing. Do you feel bad? He asked quietly. I thought about it. I feel bad for the people they hurt, the residents they shortchanged, the employees they overworked, the families they judged. The Harpers? They're just finally living in the reality they built. Ethan slipped an arm around my shoulders. You know, he said, Greg told me yesterday our net worth crossed $7 million. I snorted. Greg talks too much. I asked him, Ethan said. Mom, you could have been living in one of those big houses, traveling, wearing actual silk. I like my little house. I like my church. I like knowing my neighbor's dog's name. He smiled. You also like owning people's mortgages. I shrugged. We contain multitudes. We watched the workers for a moment. Do you ever regret not telling people about the money? I shook my head. People show you who they are when they think you're powerless. I'd hate to miss that. That night, sitting at my kitchen table with my cheap mug and my very not cheap laptop, I opened my budgeting spreadsheet out of Headit. The numbers were neat, clean, quiet. You'd never guess they represented enough power to tip a family from pillar of the community to cautionary tale. Some women give birth. Some women are actually fit to be mothers. Poor Elaine. She got both kinds in one person. If you've ever been written off because you look too modest, too bold, too poor, too quiet, if anyone ever thought you should be grateful they tolerated you, this one's for you. Drop a blue if you've ever been underestimated. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had someone treat you like you were less than until they found out who you really are? And if you're still in the middle of your own story, remember, they thought they were marrying up. Turns out, we were the upgrade.